A typical Saturday afternoon at Oakwood Plaza Mall in Lexington, Kentucky. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the large glass windows, casting soft beams of light onto the gleaming marble floors. The vast space was filled with laughter, conversation, and the enticing aroma of pretzels and cinnamon wafting from the food stalls. Families, children, and shoppers strolled leisurely, enjoying the tranquil weekend atmosphere. A young couple walked past the fountain, holding their little daughter's hand. The girl eagerly pointed toward the toy store, while her mother smiled and shook her head. A few teenagers gathered around a bubble tea counter, their laughter echoing through the space. Meanwhile, a group of elderly folks sat on nearby benches, savoring hot coffee and engaging in lively conversation. Suddenly, the automatic doors near the food court slid open. A buzz of whispers began to spread as a man walked in, dressed in a sleek, tailored black suit paired with premium jeans. His confident stride and slightly lowered head, as if trying to avoid attention, only made him more noticeable. Many turned to take a second look at his familiar face. Behind his sharp eyes, partially hidden by dark sunglasses, it seemed as though he was cautiously surveying the surroundings. What stood out the most, however, was the bright red MAGA hat perched atop his head, creating a striking contrast to the elegant ambiance of the shopping mall. "Is that Elon Musk?" a teenager standing by the fountain whispered, quickly pulling out his phone to take a photo. His hands trembled as he tried to focus the camera for the clearest shot possible. "No way," his friend murmured, though he too had started recording a video. "Why would he be here, in Kentucky, at a regular mall?" The rumor spread like wildfire. Shoppers began to pause in their tracks, phones raised. Store employees whispered to each other through their headsets. Security guards started making their way toward the area where the unexpected guest had appeared. Within minutes, visitors started gathering, murmurs and gasps of disbelief filling the air. Some were calling their friends while others began live streaming. The once ordinary mall buzzed with an electrifying energy. The man seemed oblivious, casually strolling past stores as if he had all the time in the world. His steps were slow and confident, occasionally pausing to glance at a display. A few bold individuals crept closer to get clearer photos, but no one dared to come too near. He stopped at an electronics kiosk, his attention captured by a collection of drones on display. The compact, sleek designs of the unmanned aerial vehicles seemed to intrigue him. His face revealed no emotion behind the reflective sunglasses, but his intent gaze suggested genuine interest in the advanced technology. Meanwhile, in the mall's management office, John Whitaker, the manager, was wrapping up a routine staff meeting. The small room was lit by fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. On the table lay thick folders filled with sales reports and marketing plans for the coming month. Known for his no-nonsense approach and dedication to maintaining the mall's family-friendly reputation, John was meticulous in enforcing policies. He was the kind of person who never let anything slip out of control. One of John's strictest rules: no political statements of any kind were allowed within the mall premises. This policy was designed to ensure a neutral environment where everyone could enjoy their shopping experience without encountering controversial issues. A sharp knock on the door interrupted John's thoughts. Nancy, one of the mall's veteran security supervisors, entered with an unusual expression and slightly labored breathing, as if she had just run a long distance. "John, you really need to come out and see this. We have a rather unique situation." "What situation?" John stood up, frowning. He disliked surprises, especially on weekends. Nancy hesitated, glancing around the meeting room before speaking. "Well, Elon Musk is here, or someone who looks eerily like him, and he's wearing a MAGA hat." John blinked, disbelief evident in his face. "Are you joking?" "I wish I were. A crowd is forming, and things could get out of hand quickly." John let out a sigh, grabbing the radio on his desk. "All right, we'll handle this quickly. Call for 2 additional security officers to assist." As John stepped out of his office, the noise from the main atrium already reached his ears. A sizable crowd had gathered, phones held high to capture every moment. Murmurs and whispers blended with the mall's background music, creating an oddly tense atmosphere. The mysterious man was now in the bookstore, engrossed in a book about artificial intelligence titled The Future We Build. The bright red MAGA hat stood out like a provocative beacon in the otherwise calm and quiet space of the store. John clenched his jaw as he strode forward, the sound of his leather shoes echoing on the tiled floor. He forced himself to keep his tone as calm as possible. "Excuse me, sir. May I have a word with you?" The man slowly turned around, lowering his sunglasses. That face. If it wasn't Elon Musk, it was an almost perfect replica. The crowd around them held their breath. "Yes," the man replied, his tone calm yet imbued with an indescribable authority. John glanced at the hat, making a concerted effort to keep his voice professional. "I'm going to have to ask you to either remove the hat or leave the premises. We have strict policies in place to maintain a neutral environment here." John vividly recalled the last time he dealt with a controversial situation, 6 months ago, when a small protest group attempted to hold a rally at the mall. But this was different, entirely different. "I'm going to have to ask you to either remove the hat or leave the premises," John repeated, his tone steady but tinged with tension. The man raised an eyebrow, as though he found the request intriguing. "A neutral environment? Interesting." "Yes, sir," John replied firmly. "Politically charged attire can be divisive, and we want to ensure this remains a place where everyone feels comfortable." The crowd around them grew thicker with each passing moment. The sound of cameras clicking and recording echoed incessantly. Some store employees had stopped working, standing at their doorways to watch the unfolding situation. On the second floor, people gathered along the railings, all eager to witness this unexpected confrontation. "I'm afraid I have no intention of removing my hat," the man replied, a faint smile still lingering on his lips. "Have you ever wondered if banning expressions of opinion truly creates a neutral environment?" John felt sweat beginning to beat on the back of his neck. The situation was spiraling out of control faster than he had anticipated. His hand tightened around the radio, ready to call for more support. "Sir, I am politely asking," John said, his tone now strained. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to involve security." The man crossed his arms, the bright red hat catching the light under the ceiling fixtures. "Do what you feel is necessary." The radio crackled as John called for additional security. By now, the crowd had grown significantly. Mothers paused their strollers, teenagers jostled for space along the second-floor railing, and even the pretzel vendor had left his stand to get a closer look. Within minutes, 2 security officers arrived. Eric, a tall and muscular man, stood next to John with his arms crossed over his chest. Mia, a younger and visibly nervous security officer, glanced anxiously between John and the enigmatic guest. The man remained motionless, exuding calm and confidence. There was no sign of unease or hesitation. He simply stood there, waiting, the faint smile never leaving his face. "Sir," John repeated, his voice now imbued with authority, "this is your final warning. Remove the hat or leave the premises." The man glanced at the 2 security officers before turning back to John. "And if I don't?" he asked, his tone steady, almost challenging. "Then we'll have to escort you out," Eric interjected, stepping forward. "Escort me out for wearing a hat?" the man asked, his faint smile unwavering. His sharp gaze swept over the breathless crowd. "Go ahead, let the whole world see." The crowd erupted like a bomb going off. Cheers, protests, and arguments filled the air. A middle-aged man in a denim jacket shouted, "This is ridiculous! Let him wear the hat!" A young woman raised her phone high, recording, "Exactly! He's not hurting anyone." But dissenting voices rose from the back. "This is private property. They have the right to enforce their policies." Another person chimed in, "It's not about the hat. It's about keeping politics out of public spaces." The tension rippled through the crowd like an electric current. On the second floor, people jostled for space along the railings, with some even climbing onto chairs for a better view. Nearby stores had ceased operations, with employees standing at their doorways, eyes glued to the unfolding drama. Mia, the young security officer, glanced nervously at John. She had been working here for 3 years, but had never encountered anything like this. "What should we do now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. John felt a cold sweat running down his back. In 20 years of managing malls, he had never faced such a precarious situation. Every option seemed to lead to unpredictable consequences. If he let the man stay, it would undermine the mall's rules. If he removed him, especially if it truly was Elon Musk, the media fallout could be catastrophic. Nancy hurried over, her voice urgent. "We're trending on Twitter," she whispered, holding up her phone. The hashtag number sign MAGA at the mall was spreading like wildfire, with thousands of viewers tuning into live streams. "This is getting out of hand," John muttered, massaging his temples. "I can't just ignore it." At that moment, the mysterious man took a single step forward, a small movement, yet it commanded the attention of everyone around him. He raised his hand, a simple but authoritative gesture, and the crowd gradually quieted. Phones remained aloft, capturing every second. "Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be," the man said, his voice deep, warm, and imbued with undeniable authority. "But before you make your final decision," he turned to John, "perhaps you should hear the reason I'm here." The crowd leaned in as though drawn by an invisible magnet. Even those who initially opposed him found themselves curious about the story behind the scene. The murmurs gradually faded, replaced by a charged silence full of anticipation. John stood there, weighing his options. A part of him wanted to enforce the rules strictly, but another part, perhaps the instinct honed over years in the field, told him that something bigger was at play. "All right," John finally said, his voice steady but low. "We'll listen, but if this is some sort of stunt—" "You'll understand soon enough," the man interrupted, his smile still present, but now carrying a deeper, more serious undertone. "Sometimes what we see isn't the full truth." Slowly he reached into the pocket of his suit jacket, his movements deliberate, as if not to alarm anyone. Eric, the security officer, tensed and stepped forward, but the man merely pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. Standing before the crowd, holding the letter, the man's expression was sincere, almost vulnerable. "Let me be clear," he began, his voice resonating in the now hushed mall. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here for a reason. And yes, this hat is part of that reason, but not in the way you might think." A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd again, curiosity now overpowering skepticism. Even John found himself leaning in slightly, despite his professional instincts. "Why are you here?" a voice called from the back. "What's the big deal?" The man gave a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed a depth and weight that couldn't be ignored. "I'll tell you," he replied. "But first, let me ask you this. What would you do if everything you thought about someone suddenly changed in an instant? Would you listen, or would you reject them outright because of what they're wearing?" The question hung in the air, its weight pressing down on the crowd. Some people looked away, uneasy, while others leaned forward, eager to hear the answer. John opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, the man unfolded the neatly folded paper from his pocket. He held it up, his expression turning serious. "This," he said, slowly opening the paper, "is the reason I'm here." The crowd surged forward, craning their necks to get a better view. Phones zoomed in, capturing every detail of the crisp piece of paper in his hand. John's stomach tightened as he tried to make out the words on the page. "What is it?" someone shouted. The man's demeanor softened, and his voice dropped, compelling everyone to lean in closer to hear. "It's a letter," he said, "from a young woman who works here. She wrote to me asking for help, and that is precisely why I'm here." The crowd erupted in murmurs, their curiosity reaching its peak. A letter? From someone at the mall? The idea seemed almost absurd. People exchanged puzzled glances while keeping their phones firmly trained on the scene, not wanting to miss a moment. "This letter," the man continued, his voice carrying warmth and sincerity, "is from a young woman named Kaylee. She's 21 years old, works in the food court, and dreams of going to college someday." The mall fell into an almost eerie silence. Only the faint background music playing over the mall's speakers added to the surreal atmosphere. At the back of the crowd, a young woman in a green apron holding a tray of napkins froze in place, as still as a statue. Her face turned pale, and her lips quivered as she heard her name spoken aloud. No way, Kaylee whispered, her hands trembling so much that the napkins began to fall to the floor. Her co-workers nearby turned to her, their faces a mix of surprise and curiosity. She wrote to me, the man continued, his voice now deeper and more resonant, because her family is being crushed under the weight of her mother's medical bills. These aren't just numbers on a piece of paper. They're a real burden, threatening to take away the dreams of a young woman full of potential. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the crowd. Kaylee works 2 jobs, daytime here and nights at a fast food restaurant across the street. Not to buy the latest iPhone or fancy clothes, but to keep the lights on, to ensure her mother gets the medication she needs every day. And despite all of that, she's still scraping together every dollar she can to chase her dream of going to college. The atmosphere in the crowd shifted noticeably. Faces that had initially been curious or even hostile softened, replaced by expressions of empathy and emotion. Some people began glancing toward the food court, trying to spot the girl in the story. "But what does this have to do with you?" John asked, his tone no longer sharp but filled with genuine curiosity. "Why, of all people, did she write to you?" Elon Musk, now undeniably revealed as himself, smiled faintly. It was the smile of someone holding on to a profound secret, one on the verge of being revealed. "Because she believed I could help," he said simply, turning his gaze toward the crowd. "Kaylee didn't send this letter randomly. It's not a letter begging for money or pleading for charity. It's an honest letter, sharing the dreams and resilience of a remarkable person." "Kaylee," Elon called softly, his kind eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her. "Don't hide. Come here." The young woman stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard it felt as though it might burst. The napkins from her tray had fallen to the floor, but she no longer noticed them. Around her, co-workers began murmuring. "Go, Kaylee," Sarah, her closest co-worker, whispered as she gently nudged her. "This is your moment." "We're here for you," Janet, the food court manager, added quietly. "Take a step forward." With trembling legs and a heart pounding wildly, Kaylee took one hesitant step after another toward the man who had just called her name. Her green apron, now crumpled from being unconsciously clutched for so long, seemed to weigh heavy on her. The crowd instinctively parted like the Red Sea, forming a clear path for her. Each step felt like an eternity. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes watching her, the countless phone cameras recording every moment. But what drew her focus the most was the warm, reassuring gaze of the man waiting for her. Elon Musk, someone she never imagined she would see outside the world of her dreams. Elon smiled, a genuine and rare smile that softened his often stern demeanor from news headlines. He held out the letter, now slightly worn but still neatly folded. "You were brave to write this letter," he said gently, "and you were right to trust. I want to help." Kaylee stared at the letter in his hand, memories of the night she wrote it flooding back. That night, after a grueling 12-hour shift, she had sat by her mother's bedside, pouring her heart into the letter through tears, not to ask for charity, but simply to share her story and, perhaps just maybe, receive some advice. You really read it?" Her voice was shaky. I thought it would just be one of the millions of letters you get." "I read every word," Elon said, his tone steady and sincere. "And I came here today because I wanted to meet you in person. Your letter was different, Kaylee. It touched something real, something profoundly heartfelt." Elon smiled again, reaching into the pocket of his tailored suit. He pulled out a small envelope and held it out to her. "Let's start with this. Consider it an investment in your future." Kaylee's hands trembled as she took the envelope, opening it cautiously. Inside was a check. Her jaw dropped, and she instinctively raised a hand to cover her mouth as her eyes scanned the figure. The crowd leaned in, eager to catch a glimpse of what had just happened. It's $50,000, Kaylee whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The applause erupted again, louder than before. Cheers and whistles filled the air as the crowd celebrated the heartfelt gesture. Kaylee stood frozen in disbelief, clutching the envelope as if it were a lifeline. Her co-workers rushed to her side, patting her on the back and offering their congratulations. The atmosphere in the mall transformed entirely, a stark contrast to the earlier tension. Kaylee remained silent, tears streaming down her face. Her colleagues gathered around, eager to share in this once-in-a-lifetime moment. John cautiously stepped forward, his professional demeanor replaced by visible regret. "Mr. Musk," he began, his voice softer now, I, I didn't know about the circumstances. If I had known." Elon turned to John, his gaze calm but firm. "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw a hat and made a judgment. I understand, rules are rules, but sometimes rules need to be flexible for the right reasons." John nodded, shame washing over him as he absorbed the weight of Elon's words. "You're right," he admitted. "I was so focused on enforcing policy that I missed the bigger picture." "I apologize." Elon's expression softened, and he gave a slight nod. "Apology accepted. Remember, people are more than what they wear or the opinions they hold. Sometimes it's worth taking the time to understand the person behind the appearance." The crowd murmured in agreement, with some nodding thoughtfully. Elon turned back to Kaylee, his warm smile returning. "This is just the beginning. Use this opportunity to chase your dreams. And when you're in a position to help others, keep spreading goodness." Kaylee wiped her tears, her voice trembling. "I promise, I won't let you down." As the crowd began to disperse, the energy in the mall had completely shifted. The event was captured, shared, and discussed in real time, creating a wave of buzz across social media platforms. News outlets quickly picked up the story, reporting on the unexpected act of kindness from one of the world's most recognizable figures. Back in his office, John scrolled through Twitter, his face pale as he read the comments. While most praised Musk's gesture and Kaylee's courage, some criticized John's actions, accusing him of overstepping his authority and harboring biases. That evening, Kaylee sat at her kitchen table, the check still in her hands. Her mother, frail but smiling, reached out to hold her daughter's hand. "You've always been a fighter," she said, "and now you have the chance to do something extraordinary." Meanwhile, Elon Musk's departure from the mall was as understated as his arrival. He declined interviews, waved to fans, and quietly exited. The impact of his visit, however, was anything but quiet, leaving behind a powerful story of kindness, resilience, and the importance of looking beyond first impressions. Our story doesn't end here. It became a viral phenomenon, sparking conversations across the nation about judgment, compassion, and the power of small acts of kindness. Kaylee's story inspired many others to share their struggles, leading to a wave of support and community-driven initiatives. Dear friends, this story isn't just about a hat, Elon Musk, or an unexpected gift. It's about looking beyond appearances, about empathy, and about believing that everyone has a story worth hearing. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about how John handled the situation? What part of the story touched your heart the most? Have you ever experienced a moment that shifted your perspective in a similar way? Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more meaningful stories like this one. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey.